This is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. Run for your lives. The 1980s are here. Run, run, run.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Victory Never Sleeps. I am Witan Callahan, and I am joined by folk builder Sarah Alt. And until the Alshir Godi is safely at the location for this Feast of the Einherjar that is this weekend, my good friend Sarah Alt, who I think is as big a fan of Beowulf as I am, is going to be here with me to discuss Beowulf and answer any questions that we might have. And Nick, I don't know where you got my graduation picture from, but kudos. It's kind of concerning that you found it. Sarah, where was that picture from?
I think you posted it one day when we were sharing pictures of our high school days.
That's where Nick got the pictures
from.
Oh,
my picture.
Yeah, your picture.
That was 1988. I was, yeah. Mine was from the year I graduated. I think I'm sitting on top of a car in a parking lot somewhere. That's what we did.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's my graduation picture and a picture of Sarah from high school. So now you know what we looked like when we were young. Holy Aquanet is right. There was a lot of Aquanet in mine too. All right, so before we get officially started tonight, we got a few announcements. Tickets for the Feast of the Einherjar are still on sale at the Runestone store. It is not too late to get your ticket. That is going to be our Baldershof District Feast of the Einherjar, which is going to be in South Dakota this weekend. The Alshir Godi is already en route, so he will be there, as will Founder McNallen and Githia McNallen from Odenshof, as well as a ton of Baldershof leadership and membership will be there this weekend. So it's a great venue. It's going to be a great event. So tickets are still on sale for that. Contact any of the Baldershof leadership if you have any questions about what to bring and if you can come and directions and all of that good stuff. So we will still be monitoring that up until the event. So please go ahead and get your tickets for that. Not to be confused with the Feast of the Einherjar event that is happening at Baldershof itself, which is going to be next weekend. So we've got two Feasts of the Einherjars back to back, but go ahead and support your district. If you can make it to South Dakota, please get your ticket bought for that. Also, since we do have Folk Builder Alt here, I do want to do a plug for the Asatru Academy. And Sarah, if you can just give us a real quick rundown on that Asatru Academy and how things are going and how do they contact the staff for that?
Everything with the Asatru Academy is going very well. This year we are offering grades kindergarten through third grade. Hopefully by next year we will add 5th and 6th grade onto it. So we'll cover all that elementary type stuff. You can go to asatruacademy.org and hit the contact button, and an email will come to me, and I will reach out to you, and I can answer any questions you have, and I can get your students enrolled if they fit into that thing. The most important thing with the Asatru Academy is you have to be a member of the AFA to join it. It is well worth it. The program is wonderful. We have Gothy Rob Stam, who is amazing as our dean. We have Githia Sheila McNallen, who taught school, and she offers a lot of support throughout the program. We have Rachel Johnson, who knows every single law about homeschooling in every state in the United States, and it's just amazing what she brings to the program. We also, every Friday, we have a parents meeting, and there's always a guest storyteller at that meeting to read a book to the children. Next week, it will be Matt will be on to read a story to the children. It is very much a program that is well worth doing if you're choosing homeschooling, and if you are Asatru. It is one of a kind. There is no other program like it, and was a very long making, and we are incredibly proud of it.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. Just before we get started into the meat and potatoes of tonight's topic, I also want to put up here where you can watch or listen to the podcast. We are on all kinds of streaming, Odyssey, Entropy, Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, VK. If you go into the description box of this podcast here on YouTube, you can get all the links for that. Also, we are on Twitch. That's new to me. I think that's been new for a while, but kind of behind on the time. Twitch also, we can go on Twitch. Before we get too far ahead, I do just want to plug that there is a weekly Baldur's Hof ladies book study. We are currently covering Beowulf. We just killed Grendel's mother in with the girls, didn't we? I think we did.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. So we are covering that. We do have the last third.
Yes, we did, and we're looking for the following week. And yes.
Yeah. So if you do want to get caught up on those, contact Sarah Alt. She does have them recorded. We kind of pick Beowulf apart and go through some main themes that we think are relevant, especially for our women. Also, if you are a lady of the AFA, there is a handy dandy study guide that you can download off of our Spiritual Excellence group. No, off of the ladies group. So if you are one of our AFA ladies, definitely go to the ladies group. There's an awesome study guide that's got a couple different translations and side by side with the old English version of that as well. It's got room for notes. It's got everything you need to actually have a productive book study. So we've got that as well. That being said, I do want to just do a couple shout outs real quick and answer one question, and then we're going to get started, Sarah. All right. Okay. So thank you, Ronald Blake, $50 for help a new couple get back on their feet. Thank you, Ronald Blake. You are continually being generous with helping the AFA out with all of our fundraisers and helping out the Hofs and donating in general. So we deeply appreciate that. You're here every week, and we very much appreciate what you do. So I'm going to answer two questions, and then we're going to get into the introduction. Uncle Krampus asks, why is Beowulf still relevant to our folk today, all of these centuries later, and what can we learn from it? Oh, we are going to get into that, believe me. Why is it still relevant? Because I can show you through Beowulf all of the things that apply to generosity, that apply to honor, that apply to frith, that apply to the importance of our ancestors, that apply to oaths, that apply to how women act and hold themselves in a hall, to how we conduct sumbel, to the importance of the gift cycle. Also, one of the biggest things that I take from Beowulf is, in fact, leadership and nobility. So we'll be focusing on a lot of that as we go through. Then the questions that you guys are going to have tonight, keep in mind we are trying to cram the first third of the poem with Grendel and Beowulf tonight. So if you do have questions about Grendel's mother or about the dragon, which happens later on in the poems, please save those because we will have numerous calls about this topic. So save those questions for then. One more question from Yegor Kunagaz. Have either of you considered the correlation between the Anglo-Saxon Futhark and Beowulf? Beowulf is great and an important part of our overall lore. I love all the kennings. Have I done that? Not necessarily. So I've been studying Beowulf for a long time, but I have not applied the Anglo-Saxon Futhark to Beowulf specifically yet. That sounds like an interesting concept that I would probably explore. Would be kind of interesting. So I think that might be awesome. That might be my next delve into Beowulf, might be to do that. All the kennings. Yes, we're going to go over a lot of the kennings. Kennings are a big part of Beowulf. They're a big part of the poetic nature of it. So it's awesome. Sarah, have you ever considered the correlation between the Anglo-Saxon Futhark and Beowulf at all?
Not really. Grendel mother part with the sword and the story on the sword, but for the most part, no.
Yep. Also, one last question before we get started on that. What is an easy translation of Beowulf to read? The translation I own is very difficult for my modern English mind to read. I get it. I understand. I get it. The first time I read Beowulf, I didn't understand it at all. We read it in high school, and it was a direct translation of the Anglo-Saxon. It was very much like reading Beowulf for the first time, the same way that I read the Voluspa with the Bellows translation the first time. It just went over my head until I actually picked it apart. So my recommendations for Beowulf translations are going to be J.R.R. Tolkien's version of Beowulf. His translation of Beowulf is great. I really like Dr. Leslie Hall's version of Beowulf. Both of those can be found online. They are open source. You don't have to pay for them. You can download PDFs. You can find those online. Also, this is the one that you would have to purchase, and this is a really good version, Beowulf by Seamus Heaney. This is a easy to read version. It's not bad at all. Also, Tolkien's is pretty easy as well. I'm not going to necessarily promote this book because I haven't got through this translation all the way, but it's got some funny things in it. I am going to warn you about this. It's a feminist revision of a macho heroism, so I'm not necessarily going to recommend this book, but this is super easy to read. I just don't recommend it if you're looking for something that's fully immersed in our culture, because there's a lot of hilarious banter in here, but it's most definitely a modern version of Beowulf, and I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's a modern version in modern English and the way modern people talk today. But it is quite hilarious. It was a gift from folk builder Mike Joyner because he knows I'm addicted to Beowulf, and I love it. I love anything Beowulf. So, all right. Let's see. One more question. It looks like Lydia asks, Witan Callahan, why did you pick Beowulf as a spotlight story? What are your favorite messages and overall themes? I always say when people ask me where should they start? I always tell them that you need to start with Beowulf, because in order to understand the more academic works that are very dry reading sometimes, but also very important to understanding the culture of the people and culture of our folk before, basically when this was still the religion of the folk before they were Christianized, in order to understand the culture behind that and a lot of the reasons why we still do certain things today, you have to read Beowulf first, because Lady with a Mead Cup is very Beowulf heavy. I recommend, if you are going to read this book, you need to have a copy of Beowulf side by side with it. It will help you tremendously. Also, culture of the Teutons. There's a lot of references to Beowulf, especially when it comes to honor, frith, hospitality, things like that. There's a lot of references to Beowulf. Again, I'd recommend having a good translation of Beowulf to refer to. Also, one more reference, and then we're going to get started. A lot of the things that we find in Beowulf when they're starting to talk about things like ship burials, how to mourn people, the gift giving, symbols, drinking rituals, and the adornments that they have on their swords, their shields, their helmets, what their helmets looked like. These two right here, the Viking Age, volumes 1 and 2. So if you want to look more in depth into that, if you guys start asking me questions about that, we're going to start having literally a 72-hour call on Beowulf, and that's not the point. What we want to cover is the basic ideals and how to apply them in a modern context. That's what we focus on in the ladies' book study, is how do we apply this and how do we recognize this in our culture. Alrighty. Okay, so that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into the intro of Beowulf, and bear with me because the intro to Beowulf sometimes can be as important as Beowulf itself. So there's a few things that you need to understand about the text before you start jumping into it. Beowulf itself survived as a single manuscript, which means there was only one manuscript of Beowulf written down and preserved that we know of. Every translation that we have of Beowulf, everything that you see from Beowulf is from this one manuscript. And that manuscript is called the Cotton Vitalis A15. And that is based off of Sir Robert Cotton. He was a collector of old things and manuscripts, and he had this huge library of stuff. And the library was so huge, and he had so many books that he had case upon case upon case upon case of books. And on top of these cases, he had busts of like Roman emperors, all kinds of different Roman emperors. And this one was found on the case that had the Emperor Vitalis on it. And it was A15, so it was on the first shelf, the 15th manuscript from the left. This manuscript itself, it was not just a story of Beowulf. There was several other stories that were included in this bound manuscript. And those were, what were they? The Life of Saint Christopher was one. Judith was the other. Beowulf. And there was two more. There was Alexander's Letters to Aristotle. And there was one other one. I'd have to check my notes to get that other one. But there was a basic theme with all 5 of these manuscripts. And they call this like a Liber Monstorium. And it's not the Liber Monstorium. That's a different book I'm going to get to in a second. But there's something that binds all of these together. And that is monstrosity or fantasy, what we would consider fantasy sci-fi today, right? If you are familiar with any of those things, like the Life of St. Christopher, for example, the Life of St. Christopher, he actually had like the head of a dog, right? Until he converted, and then he was miraculously saved and he was a normal human being. Judith has a woman killing a rapist in it. The letters to Aristotle were like, hey, you would not believe the things I'm seeing on this journey. And then Beowulf, of course, includes the 3 monsters and the epic hero, which is Beowulf, and then the 3 monsters of Grendel, Grendel's mother, and the dragon. Now, this is important for a couple reasons. There is another book titled Liber Monstorium, and it was the history of the Franks, Gregory of Tours' history of the Franks, and there is a character in there, Heilig, and he was actually a historical person. And this is how we help trace when this was actually written, because Heilig was actually a historical person that died in like 520. So we can kind of determine that through the correlation between these texts that this actually took place in the late 5th, early 6th century. But this wasn't written down until like way later, right? We bring this up for a couple reasons. The difference between when it was written and when it happened is really, really important. The original form was probably written down sometime between like 975 and 1025. There's a lot of debate on how did it exist beforehand. Was it a single manuscript that was written by, this Christian monk, or was it an oral translation or an oral tradition first that he had heard that story and then written down, changed a couple major nouns in the book, and it was an actual story there? Or was it somewhere in between, right? One of the big arguments that this was not something that could have been written down and advertised is because this happened let me step back with that for a second. When the Viking invasions were running through, this is the time when this was supposed to be happening, or right after that. So it wouldn't make sense for there to be an epic poem about people who had just conquered you, right? So they wouldn't be telling this epic poem about their conquerors. So they think that that's why it was written down later and told later. Like it had been an epic hero story from like the Scandinavia, Denmark, and then it had made its way lower into Europe. One of the big things to remember is that the biggest complaint about Beowulf is how heavily Christianized it is, and that we shouldn't value it because of the concepts of Christianity that are in it. One thing I want to point out with that, so if this was happening in the 600s to 700s, they were not Christian. Beowulf would not have been a Christian. Hrothgar would not have been a Christian. None of these people would have been Christian. Christianity came later. Now, you have to remember, in order to be considered a Christian text, there are some major things that would be Christian. And those things are not mentioned in Beowulf. God is mentioned a lot. But the only other biblical references are Cain and Abel. That is the only other biblical reference in there. They reference like a flood, but there's floods in every tradition, in every culture, in every creation story, including our own. There is also the mention of like hellfire and things like that, but is it Hell or is it Hel? You don't know. You just don't know. But there is the mention of a singular God. Now that obviously was added by the Christian monk who put that in there. He was emphasizing that. But keep in mind that when you're thinking about, I don't want to read this because it's a Christian text. Number one, they never once mentioned Jesus. They don't mention Mary. They don't mention the saints. They don't mention the church. They do not mention the cross. The other argument on whether or not this is Christian or pagan is sometimes the number 9 will pop up, but you have to distinguish, is that the number 9 as we see the number 9 in Asatru and how our people revered it, or is it biblical time, which was a real thing, and how someone who was a scribe of that culture would have referred to time as, like the 9th hour, would not necessarily have been related to Asatru. That would have been a biblical concept of time. So the only real things that are Bible based are going to be the descriptions with Cain and Abel, possibly the flood, depending on how you read it, and probably the time when Beowulf came out of the water after fighting Grendel's mother. So keep in mind that when you're reading this, despite the heavily Christian concepts, right, a lot of those are what they call gnomic passages, and they're parables. But you take a lot of the things that they're talking about, those are ours. You know, the concept of hospitality, the concept of wisdom, the concept of courage and nobility, those are ours. They're not necessarily Christian parables. You can take these things, they're what we preach and live and do every single day with the 9 noble virtues. So if you take that out of it, is it a Christian parable? So why do I bring this up? This is really important because of the fact, if you look at the time frame of it, it depends on how you read it, right? There is a lot of debate on what the value of Beowulf is. And you have your hardcore academics, and you have those of us that are looking for basic things in the religion, in the religiosity of it, the cultural aspects of it. Tolkien, for example, in Monsters and Critics, he criticizes the critics. He says, all you have done is mined this thing for information, and you have no appreciation whatsoever for the actual monsters in it, or the poetry itself, or the concepts that they are trying to do. Like, you are just mining it for information, right? From what their shields look like to what the queen did, why she served Hrothgar first. You're just mining it for cultural nuggets, because there are so few things written down for us to go off of, that this was like a gold mine, and we're like picking at the walls. I found a nugget of information about our ancient ancestors. So that was one of the biggest complaints on what I call Beowulf One More Time with Feeling, versus the academics, where they're like, there is so much more to Beowulf than the shields or the literary translation of a name or this, that, and the other. There's so much more here than that. And if you're only here for the nuggets, you're missing out. So that is my rant on the intro to Beowulf. This is why this is going to take forever. Sarah, do you have anything to add on the Beowulf introduction?
No, not on that part. I agree with you on that part. It's the small things, like that she serves the king first with the mead horn, or the way the hall is set up, or how Unferth is sitting at the king's feet, where technically he shouldn't deserve to be there. There's
Mm-hmm. There's all the little things that you can pick out from it that still apply to us today. Like, you can still see actions in Beowulf. You can still see characters, and you can still see personality traits that you can pick out and how people relate to each other even today. So that's one of the things that we're definitely going to point out. We've got some questions stacking up. So before we get into the first fit, we're going to answer a couple of those questions. Gothy East asks, Witan Callahan, who would you cast in a Beowulf movie that would actually be actually watchable as opposed to the one from a few years ago? Well, Gothy East, I would cast you, Gothy East, but only if you work on leg day, because Beowulf's got some strong legs, bud. But Beowulf is supposed to be noble and handsome and the best of men. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Go the East as Beowulf. Sarah, who would be Hrothgar? Who's gonna be our king, Sarah?
maybe Stephen
Stephen McNallen would be a good Hrothgar. I agree with you. I think that would be awesome. So we are casting Founder McNallen and Go the East as Hrothgar and Beowulf. I think that would be an excellent movie to watch, and I look forward to seeing it. I think we should make that happen. Eric the Red Light asks, what are your thoughts on the various Beowulf films? Are any recommended, or is it better to skip them all? I don't know. You're asking a person that likes the book, not the movie. Beowulf and Grendel is not that bad. It's not. Any movie that sexualizes Beowulf and Grendel's mother, like, puts my teeth on edge, because that's not a thing. It's gross if you understand Grendel's mother in any concept whatsoever. So they're entertaining, but they take a lot of what's the right word? I don't even know what the right word is, but they're doing it just for views. They're doing it just to be sexy, or just to be trendy, or just to have people come spend money. And there's not very many of them that are close to the actual story. But out of all of them, if you forced me to watch a Beowulf movie, the only one that I would not scream at horribly would probably be Beowulf and Grendel. And Adam asked, would it be possible to have an oral telling performance of Beowulf at a future event? I believe our tales should be experienced. Oral tradition defines our cultures, and many learn best that way. Yes and no. If somebody would want me to read that, I totally could. It takes 4 to 5 hours to read Beowulf out loud from start to finish. And that's without stopping and jumping down any rabbit holes. So that would be a very long performance. It could be something that's split up into 3 different events, maybe. But yeah, that's about a 4 4 to 5 hour affair if you can get me to only read it and not go, oh, by the way. And anybody who's ever sat at a table with me and brought Beowulf up knows that if you bring it up, I'm going to go, oh, by the way, have you ever considered this? And then it's going to be an entire hour on that topic. So only if you can get me to read it only, Adam. All right. Speaking of reading, I think
and
Sarah...
7 other topics also.
Yes. Yes. All right. Speaking of reading, I can read Beowulf pretty quickly. So what Sarah and I have kind of talked about is it might be beneficial for us to actually read this to you a little bit. And then as we're going through it, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some of these things, some of these ideas. Keep in mind, it only takes 4 hours to read it. We got 3 calls to do it. We're only going to go through like the first 16, 17 fits. So it's not that big of a deal. I read really fast because I've done this a few times. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and read fit number 1. And I'm just going to read one of the translations that we have. And I'm just going to pick the easiest one. And then I'm going to go back through and I'm going to tell you some interesting tidbits. So we're going to start with fit number 1, the life and death of skill. You're going to have to forgive my enunciation and pronunciation of words. I'm sure Go the East will have a heyday with this later. That's okay. That's fine. So the Spear Danes in days gone by and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. There was Shield's chieftain, scourge of many tribes, a wrecker of meat benches, rampaging among foes. This terror of the hall troops had come far. A founding to start with, he would flourish later on and his powers waxed and his worth was proved. In the end, each clan on the outlying coasts beyond the Whale Road had yielded to him and began to pay tribute. That was one good king. Afterwards, a boy child was born to Shield, a cub in the yard, a comfort sent by God to the nation. He knew what they had told and long times and troubles they had come through without a leader. So the Lord of Life, the glorious Almighty, made this man renowned. Shield had fathered a famous son. Beow's name was known through the north, and the young prince must be prudent like that, giving freely while his father lives, so that afterwards in the age when fighting starts, steadfast companions will stand by him and hold the line. Behavior that's admired is the path to power among people everywhere. Shield was still thriving when his time came, and he crossed over into the Lord's keeping. His warrior band did what he bade them. When he laid down the law among the Danes, they shouldered him out to the sea's flood, the chief they revered, who had long ruled them. A ring world prow rode on the harbor, ice-clad, outbound a craft for a prince. They stretched their beloved lord in his boat, laid out by the mast amidships and great ring giver. Far-fetched treasures were piled upon him, a precious gear. I never heard before a ship so well furbished with battle tackle, bladed weapons, and coats of mail. The mast treasure was lowered on top of him, and it was travel far out into the ocean's sway. They decked his body no less bountifully with offerings than those first ones did who cast him away when he was a child and launched him alone out over the waves. And they set a gold standard up high above his head and let him drift to wind and tide, bewailing him and mourning their loss. No man can tell, no wise man in the hall or weathered veteran knows for certain who salvaged that load. All right, a couple things about this. The word what. The word what. W-H-W-A-E-T in Anglo-Saxon. That's translated a whole bunch of ways. It can be so or low or whatever it is. There are a very select few of people, and if I can get a $100 donation to the AFA, I will tell you what the Brandy translation of what stands for, but I will not do it, and I'll only do it to those who donate. That is going to be a very special donation. So if that donation comes in, you will be messaged my very lengthy what does what mean, and it is quite entertaining and a little bit spicy. So I will send that to you for a $100 donation. But basically what it means is, hey, listen up. Do you guys want to hear the story? Because I got something to tell you. That's not my spicy version of it, but you'll see it translated as low. You'll see it translated as so. You'll see it translated in the one that Mike Joyner sent me as bro. That is the storyteller's way of getting your attention and tell you to listen. Okay. One of the words And I'm going to pick out a few words. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time breaking down the words themselves because we would be here forever. But one of the things I want to pick out is Yerdagum. And you'll see that in the Anglo-Saxon or in the Old English version of it. It's going to be the last word in line number 1. And they talk about days gone by, right? And if you look at that word, you can kind of recognize it because that G is usually pronounced as like a Y. So it's Yerdagum. Years ago, years gone by, days gone by. So they are talking about things that happened in the very distant past. And that's where it comes into this whole when was this actually written down thing. This happened a long time ago. This is their version of once upon a time in a land far, far away, right? So that's just interesting because it goes to the context of when was it written, right? And then we start talking about the lineage of Beowulf. Sarah, do you want to let people know what I always preach about when I'm saying if you're going to do a book study, what do you need to keep track of?
The order, the genealogy of who comes from who, because that'll come up over and over in the story. So it's easiest if you know whose son is whose and that sort of thing.
Yes. One of the biggest things that you're going to run into with doing anything regarding the sagas and in Beowulf as well is there are over 70 proper names in Beowulf. Rather than reading it and having to flip back to the index and go, who in the world was this person again? I always let my ladies know, hey, the best thing to do is keep a notebook or keep notes. Like as people are introduced, draw little lines to them. There's kind of a meme floating around that I got sent to me today that I'm not going to share because it made me laugh, but I was kind of like, yeah, that is what I look like. And it's that meme of the guy standing in front of the board, like looking all panicked with like the red strings going everywhere and papers everywhere. Yeah, that's what I'm telling you to do. Keep track of that because it's important of whose sons belong to who. And Sarah, why is it important that we understand the deeds of the grandfather and the deeds of the father and the deeds of the son? How does that correlate to this thing that we do? I'm not sure if Sarah can hear me. Well, the importance of
I seem to be having a little bit of internet trouble, or
Okay.
it's lagging a little bit. So if you could repeat the question.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. So why is it important, in what we do, that we know who the father is and what the father's deeds are, and then we recognize who his son is, and then we add his deeds, and then we have the grandson who is this king, and now he's adding these deeds. Why is that important to the concepts that we have?
Because that is all part of our the word escapes me. Our luck.
Orlog.
But it's not
Yeah,
luck.
Orlog
It's,
and weird.
our Hamunja.
That as well. Yes. It goes into
So
your
it all
luck.
comes together as part of ours. It totally escaped me.
Yeah, no, you're good. So the importance of the the grandfather is important because it affects, the orlog of the son, which affects his grandson. So I mean, everything builds upon itself in layers, right? So it's important to know who belongs to who and who did what and when. You know, it's kind of like setting your starting point, right? And it also runs into your luck. It ties all together with the deeds of your tribe. So that's one of the things that we want to point out as well, is it's important to track that when you're reading these things, because you'll notice that it starts layering on top of itself. And it'll not only repeat itself a lot in here, it will go over the same thing over and over again. For example, hi, I'm Beowulf, this is my lineage. And then he meets the next person, hi, I'm Beowulf, this is my lineage. Happens all the time. So they're building layers is what they're doing. Yep. One of the things that we have in here and how we know that this is definitely from the northern side is that you have Skadelandum, which would be Scandinavia, right? They're specifically telling us we are from Scandinavia. That they're saying it right there in the translation. And Beow's name was known through the north. Now, keep in mind, this is not Beowulf. This is just Beow. This is the son of Shield-Sheafson. And one of the things that they talk about, and it says in here, a young prince must be prudent like that, giving freely while his father lives, so that afterwards in age, when fighting starts, steadfast companions will stand by him and hold the line. What he's talking about here is generosity, the gifting cycle, right? Making sure that as a leader, you are taking care of your men, because if you don't take care of your men, what's going to happen? Sarah, what's going to happen if we have a leader that is just working people and sending them off to war and never reciprocating that frith and that bond between them? Sorry, Sarah, I think your
If
internet
a king doesn't take care of his men, they're not going to fight for him, and they're not going to defend him.
Yep. Oh, I think we lost Sarah. I'm sorry, Sarah. I think she's having some computer issues. But so what we've got with that is that's going to be an example of generosity. That's going to be an example of the gift-giving cycle, right? These men are fighting for him. These men are dying for him. These men are bringing him wealth and basically signing up to be his lingman. That is a gift, and he is gifting them in return, whether it's through spoils of raiding, whether it's through gifts of horses, or just in general taking care of his people. It's important that you do that and show that generosity, so that when you really need them, they're going to be there, because they know that when they need you, you're going to be there. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out with that. Like I said, I take a lot of leadership and nobility concepts of Beowulf, and that's kind of what I teach to our leadership as well as to our women, is leadership and nobility, and how to make sure you're building frith, which we will get into is extraordinarily important for women themselves. And in the Old English, they talk about the beloved companions and the chiefmen. And you can see that in the translation from Old English, it actually translates to beloved companions. So that's an important concept as well. After this here, we go into the ship burial, right? We talk about all of the beauty of it. One of the interesting things, just as a side note, our people were doing ship burials, sending people out to sea, but they were also doing cremation, which we will see later on in our third or fourth call with Beowulf. But cremation stopped in the north around the 1100s, after Christianity really took hold, because Christianity does not approve of, all the way up until like I believe the 60s or 70s, would not approve cremation for their religious reasons. So a lot of this stuff that you see with the ship burials and pushing them off, if there is a ship burial, it could be in that time when they were burying the body with the grave goods rather than cremating it. because you had that overlap of Christianity moving north. But yeah, the cremation actually stopped for the Christians, for our people, after full Christianization around 1100, because it was very taboo to cremate somebody. If you look up, just a point of reference, if you're interested in ship burials, if you look up Sutton Hoo, the Sutton Hoo ship burial, there's a very, very good archaeological example of that you can find, and that was a ship burial that was found in Suffolk, England, I believe. There's a whole lot of archaeological information on that, so definitely look that up if you're interested in the ship burials. All right? Awesome. So from there, we're going to go into a little bit of the building of the hall and more of Beowulf's lineage. So we start with Skjold Chieftain. Then we have his son Beow, and then from Beow we have Halfdane, and Halfdane's where we're going to go next. So keep in mind, we're gonna be 4 generations down because we're building layers of greatness. One of the things I want you to remember when you're reading Beowulf is your narrator will never lie to you. Unlike modern novels and such, the narrator will never lie. The narrator will always tell you the truth, and will always tell you things that are upcoming and give you hints. Okay? One of the things he's giving hints to is how important it was that Beow was born, the son of Skjold. There is an upcoming an upcoming song or poem that's going to be introduced to us, where we're going to be introduced to a king who ruled poorly before this particular dynasty did. And we're going to see the very, very stark difference between Hrothgar's family and between him. So that's going to be upcoming. I'm not going to talk too much about that now because I'll point it out when it comes. But keep in mind, your narrator will never lie to you. So this is already telling us and setting the stage for the difference between a good king and a bad king. All right. So talking about the Hall of Heorot, I'm going to read this to you guys. Hi, Sarah. And I don't think we have any questions. I'm wondering if my producer is telling me if we have questions or not. I don't think that we do. I think we're doing okay. All right, so the Hall of Heorot. Then it fell to Beow to keep the forts. He was well regarded and ruled the Danes for a long time after his father took leave of life on earth. And then his heir, the great Halfdane, held sway for as long as he lived, their elder and warlord. He was 4 times a father, the fighter prince. One by one they entered the world. Hrothgar, Hrothgar, good Helga, and a daughter I have heard, who was Anala's queen, and a balm in the bed of the battle-scarred Swede. The fortunes of war favored Hrothgar. Friends and kinsmen flocked to his ranks, young followers, a force that grew to be a mighty army. So his mind turned to hall building. He handed down orders for men to work on the great mead hall, meant to be a wonder for the world forever. It would be his throne room, and there he would dispense his God-given goods to young and old, but not the common land or people's lives. Far and wide through the world I have heard orders for work to adorn the wall step were sent to many peoples, and soon it stood there, finished and ready in full view, the Hall of Halls. Heorot was the name he had settled on, whose utterance was law. Nor did he renege, but doled out rings and torques at the table. The hall towered, its gables wise and high, awaiting to a barbarous burning. That doom abided, but in the time it would come, the killer instinct unleashed among in-laws, the bloodlust rampant. Then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet. Every day in the hall, the harp being struck, in the clear song of the skilled poet telling the mastery of the man's beginnings, how the Almighty had made the earth and the gleaming plain girdled with water. In his splendor he set the sun and the moon and the earth's lamplights, lanterns for men, and filled the broad lap of the world with branches and leaves and quickened life and every other thing that moved. So times were pleasant for the people there until they finally won. A fiend out of hell began to work his evil in the world. Grendel was the name of the grim demon, haunting the marches, marauding round the heath and the desolate fens. He had dwelt for a time in the misery among the banished monsters. Cain's clan, whom the Creator had outlawed and condemned as outcasts for the killing of Abel, the eternal Lord had exacted a price. Cain got no good from committing that murder because the Almighty made him Athema, and out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms and giants too, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward. Okay, so now we're getting introduced to Halfdane, and then we get introduced to Hrothgar. So what they're setting up here is all of these men, all 4 generations of these men were good kings. That's what they're telling us. In regards to building halls, in regards to handing out rings and gold and gifts of thanks and generosity. One of the things that we have on here that I want to point out also is, again, your narrator will never lie to you. And it says in here, the hall towered as gables wise, high and awaiting a barbarous burning. They're telling us things that happen, not necessarily as part of the story. So this is a little bit confusing until you get further down the line, and they'll mention it again, actually. And what they're actually talking about is there's some kind of sacred land that this place is built on, or claimed land, and it was with the Hrothgar kingship. And what they were doing is there was a political marriage between Frau Waru and their heir Ingold, and they fight. They burn Heorot to the ground, and Hrothgar and his nephew Hrothulf end up beating them, but Heorot ends up getting burned. So they're telling us things that happen in the future, but they're leading up to things, right? When we talk about Grendel, so let's talk about Grendel for a minute. Before we do that, sorry, Sarah, I'm jumping down into another rabbit hole here. What they're also talking about before they introduce Grendel, they talk about the setting of order in the gifts. And they talk about that specifically, about the creation of the earth, about the moon and the stars and the light. They talk about giving life and populating life. Before they introduce Grendel, they introduce order, okay? Just as our gods took disorder and chaos and moved it into order, they are showing us that order is good. And after that, we talk about disorder. So we're setting up those two things, order versus disorder, order versus chaos. Directly after that, we start talking about Grendel. And Sarah, can you tell us where Grendel comes from? What happened, and why is it bad? And why does that represent Grendel with Cain and Abel?
Cain killed Abel, and the biggest thing that our ancestors were horrified by and discounted was kinslaying. So when you slay your brother, that is the biggest wrong you could create, and that causes chaos. And Grendel came from chaos.
Yes, ma'am. And this is one of those very, very sparse biblical references here, is the battle between Cain and Abel. One of the worst things that you can ever do in our culture, one of the very worst things you can do is slay your own, to hurt your own, to hurt your community. Kinslaying was one of the worst things that you could do. Keep that in mind, because we're setting up for more things. It is the worst atrocity that there is. It is so bad that from that atrocity sprang all of the things that they consider bad, right? They specifically list like elves and giants and ogres and evil phantoms, but they're just listing things from lore and adding their own stuff to that. So Grendel was one of these monstrosities that happened because of the first kinslaying, as the Christians see it, right? Kinslaying is one of the worst things. You can see it in our lore as well, right? You see that in the stories of Balder. Balder dying by the hand of his brother, whether it was Fold or not, was awful. And it set off all of these things, right? So the ultimate chaos equals the ultimate worst things possible, is what basically what it's saying. You can't do anything worse than that as far as they're concerned. So that's why when we talk about the awful burning of the awful burning of the hall itself, they mention that. They mention that in here when they talk about the killer instinct unleashing among in-laws, the bloodlust rampant, right? So again, your narrator is setting you up to go, oh my goodness, this sounds bad. And then you go down here and said, oh, it's really bad. If you kill your kin, Grendel's going to pop out of nowhere. So that is kind of what we got with Grendel. He is chaos to the order. So they're demonstrating the differences between order and chaos on that. All right. So from here, we have a whole lot of information about Grendel and how terrible he is. And before we get into that, I promise we're going to be getting into Beowulf here pretty quick, because basically what's going to happen is we've got the lineage of the hall, right? These four men. From there, we are introducing this order, or we're introducing what order is, and we're introducing what chaos is. We're setting that up. So from there, we get into Grendel itself. Couple things to know about that is there is a lot of descriptions on what he was. I can read that for us if you guys like. This one's a little bit lengthy, and we're already at an hour. But what we've got on there is, when you think of Beowulf, in the way Beowulf plays in my head is like a Quentin Tarantino movie. I have a very active imagination, especially when it comes to battle scenes and all of the stuff that you're reading in here. It's very descriptive, and it's a beautiful poem, even if what he's describing is not a beautiful thing, but it's written very beautifully. It's trying to nail home for you what it is that is actually going on. So we're going to go ahead and read that really quick. We're going to explain Grendel a little bit and talk about what it means when he comes, and why he hates these people so bad. So after nightfall, Grendel set out for the loft house to see how the Ringdanes were setting into it after their drink. And there he came upon them, a company of the best asleep from their feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrows. Suddenly, then, the god-cursed brute was creating havoc, greedy and grim. He grabbed 30 men from the resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed in the raid, blundering back with the butchered corpses. Then, as dawn brightened and the late day broke, Grendel's powers of destruction were plain. Their wassail was over. They wept to heaven and mourned under mourning. Their mighty prince, the storied leader, sat stricken and helpless, humiliated by the loss of his guard, bewildered and stunned, staring aghast at the demon's trail in deep distress. He was numb with grief, but got no respite, for one night later, merciless Grendel struck again with more gruesome murders. Malignant by nature, he never showed remorse. It was easy then to meet with a man, shifting himself to a safer distance in the bed in the bothies, for he could blind the evidence of his eyes, the obviousness of that hall watcher's hate. Whoever escaped kept a weather eye open and moved away, so Grendel rolled in defiance of right, one against all, into the greatest house in the world stood empty, a deserted wallstead. For 12 winters, seasons of woe, the Lord of the Shielding suffered under his load of sorrow. And so before long the news was known over the world. Sad lays were sung about the beset king and the vicious raids and ravages of Grendel, his long and unrelenting feud, nothing but war, how he would never parley or make peace with any Dane, nor stop his death-dealing, nor pay the death price. No counselor could ever expect fair reparation from those rabid hands. All were endangered, young and old, were hunted down by the dark death shallow who lurked and swooped in the long nights on the misty moors. Nobody knows where these reavers from hell roam on their errands. So Grendel waged his lonely war, inflicting constant cruelties on the people, atrocious hurt. He took over Heorot, haunted the glittering hall after dark, but the throne itself, the treasure seat, he was kept from approaching. He was the Lord's outcast. Those were hard times, heartbreaking for the Prince of the Shieldings, powerful counselors, the highest in the land, who lent advice plotting how best the bold defenders might resist the beat of the sudden attacks. Sometimes at pagan shrines, they vowed offering to idols, swore oaths to the killer of the souls might come to their aid and save the people. That was their way. Their heathenish hope deep in their hearts, they remembered hell. The almighty judge of the good deeds and the bad, Lord God, head of the heavens, high king of the world, was unknown to them. O cursed is he who is the time of trouble, has the thrust of his soul in the fire's embrace. Forfeiting help, he has nowhere to turn, but blessed is he who has come to the death, can approach the Lord and find friendship in the Father's embrace. All right, that sounds super Christian-y, but let me break it down for you. Just trust me here. All right, so I'm going to ask Sarah, after reading all this, Sarah, what is it that angers Grendel the most? What is it that makes him want to kill these people? What is it that they have that he does not have?
He does not have the warmth of the hall, the acceptance of the people, and he does not have the fame that the king has.
Yeah, he doesn't have a community. He doesn't have Frith. The sounds that are coming from this hall as people are celebrating together, stumbling together, feasting together, the sound of their happiness enrages him. One of the things that you want to watch as well is he specifically talks about how many people Grendel is killing. And this is going to give us an idea of the monstrosity that is Grendel. He's picking up 30 men. He is picking up 30 men and devouring and butchering 30 men at a time. Okay? He hears the singing. He hears the feasting. He hears the clinkling of the horns and the glasses and the laughter and the song and the conversation. And it puts him into a rage, an absolute rage. And from there, he's killing everyone. 30 men at a time. Now, think about this. Think about putting yourself in Hrothgar's position. You can't just leave your place unattended. So you have 30 men that are dying. The next night, he's got to post guards. What's going to happen to those guards? They're going to die. And again, and again, and again. So this tells you a few things. Number one, Hrothgar's got a lot of followers because we're losing like 30 people at a time, right? The size of this monster has got to be amazing. Okay. 30 men. They have swords, they have shields, they have helmets, they have spears. They can't touch him. They can't kill him. They can't get away from him. There's nothing in here that ever tells us that there was a single survivor that fought Grendel. There was nobody that got away to tell him the story. So when they talk about, think of yourself as a leader of men, and you are knowing that these men are going to die, and these men know they're going to die. And you clean up the blood of your kin every single morning. That's awful and atrocious. But it also talks about a leader of men and how he feels sending his men to know that they're going to die. A good king will what? A good king will be humiliated by that loss. He cannot protect them. He will mourn and he will be devastated. And Hrothgar is those things because Hrothgar is a good king. A lot of this also, when we talk about the throne. So he is wreaking havoc. He is coming in and he's splattering blood and guts all over the wall. And he's tearing men to shreds and shoving them in his man purse and carrying them off to his lair. Yes, I said Grendel has a man purse. It's okay. He's shoving men in his man purse and he's taken off to his lair to have a snack later. He's, eating these men and butchering them. One thing he cannot touch is the throne. Can't touch the throne. The throne is the representation of order. Okay. He cannot fully defeat order. He's the epitome of chaos, but that throne is the example of order in their constant battle. He can't walk up to that throne. And it says in there that he is cursed by God. God will not let him approach that throne. Take the word God out of that. Order will not be conquered by chaos. All of these terrible, awful things happen to us. We go through our lives and we are defeated again and again and again, and we feel like we're getting butchered again and again and again. And sometimes we feel like we're in Grendel's man purse, right? But one thing always stands. And the one thing that always stands is that throne. That golden, beautiful throne that is never blood spattered, that is never destroyed, that Grendel cannot touch. Okay? Like I said, take the word God out of this. There's one thing that is always stable, and that is order. And there is one thing that is always what creates that order. Sarah, what created the order at the time of creation?
Our gods did.
Yeah. The gods, our gods put things to order. They named the stars in the heavens. They set the stars on their way in the moon, and they created Midgard out of the bones of Ymir. They put order from chaos. So one thing, no matter how many times you feel like the guy in Grendel's man purse, there is always a constant. Chaos is not going to defeat order. This tells us that chaos cannot touch order. There are some things that will never, ever wane. There are some things that will always be steadfast, and that throne will always be steadfast. He can't touch it. Now we're jumping into a Brandy rabbit hole. Sorry about that. But yes, man purse. All right, so we've got a couple questions that are piling up. We're going to answer those really, really, really quick. Just want to make sure that there's nothing else that I want to cover on that. Sarah, am I missing anything from that fit in particular that we've talked about before?
No, not up to this point, no.
Got a couple questions here. Did you enjoy the not-so-subtle influence of Beowulf on the 13th Warrior? I thought it was a nice homage. But again, anything that's Beowulf-related movie-wise, I'm going to be like, really? You didn't do it right. Super, super hard on that. But yes, it's a good homage. All right. Isolation can breed a sort of hopelessness, bitter depression. I wonder if Grendel could have allegorical significance associated with that lonely depression. Maybe isolating yourself will cause you insanity and destruction. I will give you that. Maybe when what you should do is gather to a community and you decide to be Grendel and you decide to go out on the fens and isolate yourself and not participate in joy and not participate in celebration and not be a part of your community, that mentality can take over. And then you allow yourself to be a victim of chaos versus being something that holds up that order. Finwraith said, who do you think would portray Grendel well in a movie? I don't know. I don't know. The Alshir Agothi is here. Maybe I'll ask the Alshir Agothi who he thinks should portray Grendel in the movies. Who would be good?
I'm on the spot. This is one of those questions that I give a lot of thought to when asked. So I'm kind of in my head right now contemplating.
I'll let you contemplate.
What if? All right. Ron Perlman.
Hey, that's a good one. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that would be excellent. Well done, sir.
Do what I can.
Gothi Stam asks, what is Grendel? How did he originate? Is he pure chaos? Yes. So Grendel is a monster originated from the original death, the Cain versus Abel, which is the most bad thing you could ever do. Killing your kin, hurting your community, hurting your family. Is he pure chaos? Yes. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to ask the Alshira Gothi if he's going to disagree with me on that, but I'm going to, when we talk about Grendel's mother, I will talk about the difference between pure chaos and organized chaos. But Alshira Gothi, what's your opinion on that?
Is that the dichotomy we're working on? Is pure chaos versus structured chaos?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I'd suppose of chaotic things, one of the themes with Grendel is the emotional flailing of chaos, where it shoots out in all directions and where it's driven by a degree of madness. So I do think that's more of an unfiltered chaos in that sense.
And then we've got another question, Alshira Gothi, that I'm going to give to you. And I'll answer it as well. When you say your own, when we talk about killing your own, being one of the worst things you could ever do, hurting your own community, do you mean people we share frith with, or people of our race in general? If we kill a fellow Aryan in self-defense or war, is that offensive to the gods? Alshira Gothi, I'm going to let you take that one first.
So, context, with so many things, context is everything. We have circles that kind of ripple out from us that connect us in a greater degree with proximity to ourselves. It's hard to say. I know we are very big on talking about brother wars now. No more brother wars. But every war in the epic stories of our folk almost invariably is a brother. In that sense, if we extend it to everybody of our race. At that time, the world looked very different than it does now. On the hierarchy of things, yes, killing a member of your family is pretty well understood as always being one of the worst things that can be done. And the way that it is, at least I think at best described in Culture of the Teutons, it's the kind of a calamity that you can't avenge. Because if a kinsman slays a kinsman, your only source of vengeance and righting those scales would be to continue the cycle of killing your own. So your own Haminya is perpetually weakened in that cycle. There's no way to make it right. I think that extends, again, a lot of things are situational, but I think in the world that we live in today, I think it does extend to our extended chosen family, to the Asatru Folk Assembly, to our church. I think acting against other members of our church is similar, if a degree removed, from acts of violence against one of your own blood kin. And the further you go out, yeah, I think on the scale of things, someone of our race killing other members of our race is a deeper tragedy than if it was applied to one of us killing someone of another race. And I think that scales in proportion to your interconnectedness. But we see that just culturally, and it's not just an Aryan concept. It's a known fact of existence, and it's something that we wouldn't be so hesitant to say. And we've heard many times in the media the idea of how terrible black on black crime is. By that same principle, how terrible white on white crime is. And we don't want that. The biggest lament to me about the current situation between Russia and Ukraine is, again, two tribes of our folk are killing one another with no boon to our folk. And so I think that principle writ large is harder to do when you deal with the politics of nation states. But as a general rule, yeah, you don't want to inflict harm upon those that you share commonality with. The closer that commonality, the more that commonality becomes bonds of frith, and the consequence for shedding that person's blood becomes much greater. But the principle applies. It just weakens the further out from your direct kin group it goes.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. So I will keep reading if you want me to keep reading this stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to summarize this one because this is where we get into the part where the people who love Beowulf will see that Beowulf is going to be the man that other men want to be, and we're about to see this. So where we're at right now is we've already established the genealogy of Beowulf and why they are our genealogy of Hrothgar, why they're good kings, and we've got the introduction of Grendel and him destroying everybody. So basically what happens next, and like I said, I will read it if you want me to read it, otherwise I'm going to summarize this part because at this point in time is where we start getting those layers again. We're going to start repeating ourselves because what happens is Beowulf has gotten word that there's something shady going on, right? And he is going to come on his way to get it. So this is to fix this issue. So what we've got from this point forward over the next few fits is, hey, I'm Beowulf. Well, hi, Beowulf, who are you? And he basically gives his rundown of his awesomeness, and then we go to the next person, and they're like, hi, I'm Beowulf. Here's why I'm awesome. And we have all of these people getting man crushes on Beowulf because I'm going to point out a couple things in these particular fits, which are going to be fits 4 and fits 5. Now, we talk about Hylax Thane, which is Beowulf himself, all right? He was over in Gateland, and they specifically tell us there is nobody else like Beowulf alive. It says that in here. There was no one else like him alive. If you look at the Hall version, what the Hall version says about him is, heard in his home, the heroes then living. He was the stoutest and the strongest, sturdy and noble. There is nobody else like Beowulf. I want you to keep that in mind because we're going to start listening to the things that Beowulf has done. Beowulf is the...
Before we do,
go ahead.
I want to take just a second to acknowledge 5 coffees that were purchased for us by Ronald Blake. Ronald, we appreciate your donations as always. Thank you very much. Carry on.
Okay, so it looks like the requests that I've gotten in the private chat are overwhelmingly read. So I'm going to read. All right. While I'm reading, so you guys don't just have to watch my face, if the Alshira Gothi would like to walk around and show us the amazing venue while I'm reading, that might give them something to look at while I'm reading this fit.
I will show you guys the hall, but it's pitch black out, so I don't think that's going to translate today.
Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read, but I'm going to read 2 fits. I'm going to read fit 4 and fit 5. All right. So that troubled time continued, woe that never stopped, steady affliction for half-day and sun, too hard an ordeal. There was panic after dark, people endured raids in the night, riven by terror. When he heard about Grendel, Hylax Thane was on his home ground over in Gateland. There was no one else like him alive. In his day, he was the mightiest man on earth, high-born and powerful. He ordered a boat that would ply the waves. He announced his plan to sail the Swan's Road and search out the king, the famous prince who needed defenders. Nobody tried to keep him from going. No elder denied him, dear as he was to them. Instead, they inspected omens and spurred his ambitions to go, whilst he moved about like the leader he was, enlisting men the best he could find. With 14 others, the warrior boarded the boat as captain, a canny pilot among the coasts and currents. Time went by. The boat was on the water in close under the cliffs. Men climbed eagerly up the gangplank. Sand churned in the surf. Warriors unloaded a cargo of weapons, shining war gear in the vessel's hold. Then heaved out away with the will in the wood-wreathed ship. Over the waves with the wind blew her and foam at her neck. She flew like a bird until her curved prow had covered the distance on the following day. At the due hour, those seafarers sighted land, sunlit cliffs, sheer crags, looming headlands, and landfall they sought. It was the end of their voyage, and the Geats vaulted over the side, out on the sand, and moored up their ship. There was a clash of mail and a thresh of gear. They thanked God for that easy crossing on a calm sea. When the watchman on the wall, the Shielding's lookout, whose job it was to guard the sea cliffs, saw shields glittering on the gangplank and battle equipment being uploaded, he had to find out who and what the arrivals were. So he rode to the shore of the horsemen of Hrothgar's and challenged them in formal terms, flourishing his spear. What kind of men are you who arrive rigged out for combat in coats of mail, sailing here over the sea lanes in your steep-hulled boat? I have been stationed as lookout on this coast for a long time. My job is to watch the waves for raiders, any danger to the Danish shore. Never before was a force under arms disembarked so openly, not bothering to ask if the sentries allowed them safe passage or the clan had consented. Nor have I seen a mightier man at arms on this earth than the one standing here, unless I am mistaken. He is truly noble. This is no mere hanger-on in hero's armor. So now before you fare inland as interlopers, I have to be informed about who you are and where you hail from. Outsiders from across the water, I say it again. Sooner you tell where you come from and why, the better. The leader of the troop unlocked his word hoard. The distinguished one delivered this answer. We belong by birth to the Geat people, and I owe allegiance to Lord Hygelac. In his day, my father was a famous man, a noble warrior, lord named Ecgthau. He outlasted many a long winter and went on his way. All over the world, wise men in council continue to remember him. We come in good faith to find your lord and nation's shield, the son of Halfdane. Give us the right advice and direction. We have arrived here on a great errand to the lord of the Danes, and I believe therefore there should be nothing hidden or withheld between us. So tell us if what we have heard is true about this threat, whatever it is, this danger abroad in the dark nights, this course maker mongering death in the Shielding's country. I come to proffer my wholehearted help and counsel. I can show the wise Hrothgar the way to defeat his enemy and find respite, if any respite is to reach him ever. I can calm the turmoil and terror in his mind, otherwise he must endure woes and live in grief for as long as his tall stands at the horizon on its high ground. Undaunted, sitting astride his horse, the coast guard answered, anyone with gumption and sharp mind will take the measure of two things, what's said and what's done. I believe what you have told me, that you are a troop loyal to our king. So come ahead with your arms and your gear, and I will guide you. What's more, I'll order my own comrades on their word of honor to watch your boat down there on the strand, keep you safe in her fresh air until time comes for her curved prow to prove wings, preen on the waves, and bear this hero back to Geatland. May one so valiant and venturesome come unharmed through the clash of battle. So they went their way, their ship rode water, broad beam bound by its hawser and anchored fast. 4 ships flashed above the cheek guards and brightly forged, work of goldsmiths watching over those stern-faced men. They marched in steps, hurrying on until the timbered wall rose before them, radiant with gold. Nobody on earth knew of another building like it. Majesty lodged there, its light shape over many lands. So their gallant escort guided them into the dazzling stronghold and indicated the shortest way to it. And the noble warrior wheeled on his horse and spoke these words: "It is time for me to go. May the Almighty Father keep you in his kindness, whatever your exploits. I'm away to the sea, back on alert against enemy raiders." All right, so this is where it gets a little bit entertaining. Beowulf hears about this monster, and as we see, Beowulf tends to like monsters. Beowulf likes to fight monsters. Beowulf likes to prove how big and strong he is and how noble he is, and he likes to kill things. So he hears of this outstanding monster over here bothering Hrothgar and all of his people, and he's like, awesome, a monster. I know just what to do. I'm going to go kill it. He's got a bad habit of jumping into things and and fortunately he comes out on top, but he's just like, it's a monster. I got it. It's fine. So he hears about this. He gets a boat and he runs over there. And it says in here specifically, it says no, when people heard that he was going to go, no one tried to stop him. Not his family, not his king, not the old, not the young, not even the people who didn't like him very much. Instead, they started doing things to bless his journey and give him foresight. Not a single person tried to stop him. There's something to be said about that. If you say you're going to go do something, number one, there is a very good possibility he's the only one that can do this, which according to what our narrator tells us, who again never lies to us, there is nobody else like Beowulf. Keep that in mind because that's coming up later. There's nobody else better than Beowulf. He is the biggest, he is the strongest, right? Like the Princess Bride and the Great Big Giant, I am the biggest and the strongest. Beowulf actually is. Nobody tried to talk him out of it. They encouraged him along the way, and they did things before he went to try to help him out, try to give him some insight. There's something to be said about that when they're just like, I'm going to go fight this giant. And they're like, awesome, Beowulf, you go. We know you're going to come back. We know you are. And Beowulf rolls up with 14 other men in this ship that he got. They have all heard about Grendel. This is a popular story because if they're hearing it, you know, the stories from the merchants and all these things, they're being told. These 14 men that are going with Beowulf, 110% know what they're getting into. It's not a mystery. And he finds the best of his men. These men are knowingly going to fight a monster that kills 30 men a night, barehanded, throws them in his man purse, and takes off to his lair to eat them. They are knowingly following Beowulf to possible death, not knowing if they're going to survive. Beowulf's probably going to survive because he's the biggest and the strongest, but they might not, and they follow him anyway. Why? Because of his nobility, because of his goodness, and because he is a statue of order. They follow him because he is good. They follow him because he is noble. They follow him because he is victorious, time and time and time again. So keep that in mind. These men that are getting in this boat, most of them think they're probably going to die, but they're going to go down in flames or they're going to succeed with Beowulf. Right? One or the other. Ashir, go, anything to add about that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly everything you said, but also everyone can't be the hero, but you gain fame and Haminia, and your luck is enhanced when you tie yourself to the hero. You want to back the winner. That's one of the subtle things that we do during Sumble. We share boasts and oaths to do things so that all of us who participate in that Sumble get benefit if you follow through on your oath. It's the same reason that we assign somebody to shut you down if your oath isn't approved or if we don't want to stand with it. Because if we affirm it and in some way help it along, then we get a little bit of benefit from it. If we affirm it and help it along and you don't succeed, then we bear some of the cost. It's the same thing with, and I think this is worth a lot of people considering. There is tremendous glory in serving with and serving a great man and a great hero. Everyone is not going to be the biggest and the strongest and the hero of the story, but you following your lord into battle, even if the outcome is uncertain and the odds are greatly against you, you stand to profit greatly by being in his company when he does great deeds. Being counted on the right side of things is more important than momentary victories, and it's certainly more important than survival. You gain glory. So much of the theme that we've seen so far and will continue to see is building fame and building reputation. Earlier, I caught a brief bit of it while I was eating some of my dinner, but thought escaped me. Hold on, it'll be there. It was good to. It was something I wanted to bring up at the time. Oh yeah, so they ask, knowing where you came from being important, your pedigree being important. yes, it is important for your blood lineage and for telling about who you are, but also the reason that's important is that lineage, that family, that tribe, that nation has a reputation that you're tying into by, hey, I don't know you, but I know your people and they're all solid. So you're likely to be solid as well. Oh, wow, you stood with Beowulf against Grendel? Cool, right this way. You build fame for yourself, and building fame and having people speak of your deeds and the people you stood with when they accomplished great deeds was always something to be celebrated, and is so today.
Yes, sir. We also see the respect of a man by another man. Okay. So we always have this saying, well, I shouldn't say we, some of us ladies have this saying that we always watch how men react to other men. They are either going to be threatened by that man or they are going to respect that man. There's never an in between. He is either your lesser or your superior. Men don't see each other as equals, so not always. But we kind of watch how men treat other men as women. If there is a man that has the respect of every other man in the room, that man is the leader, even if it's not by title. We watch that. We also watch when there is someone who deserves that respect and that we see specific things that we want to honor as well. We can actually bring that honor to that man. Women can determine that worth. And the other men will sometimes go, wait a minute, why is he getting all the attention? So the respect of men to men is displayed here because Beowulf jumps out of this damn boat. He doesn't write first. He doesn't call first. He doesn't send smoke signals first. He just shows up in a foreign country with 15 guys in a big, beautiful boat, armed to the teeth, and he just jumps out like he owns the place, right? There is an air of superiority and nobility there. I don't mean any harm, but look at me. I'm like asserting my dominance over this entire situation right here, right here. I'm not asking for permission. I'm here to kill monsters, right? Just jumps out. He doesn't even send a message ahead. This poor person sitting on the wall is like wielding his spear at him going, who are you and why are you here? I've never seen anybody that's ever dared to just jump onto this shore fully armed to the teeth like you own the place. And he's like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm just Beowulf. I'm here to kill a monster for you. And the guy's like, oh, okay, well, in that case, there's more to it than that. But the guy instantly, when he sees him, makes the comment of, this is not just some hanger-on in hero's armor. This is a noble man. I can tell looking at him that he is strong and noble, powerful and strong. And he can also tell that by the men who are following him. You can tell who's in charge and the men are following behind. So it's an instant recognition of authority. But yeah, he just rolls up like he owns the place. Alshir Godi, do you have anything to add about a man's respect for men and authority and following the leader?
I do. I just want to reiterate the point that you made, because Beowulf is very important to me as a piece of our lore, and unfortunately it seems to have lost some prominence in this generation of folks. Back when I first got involved in Asatru, it was required reading. One of the most important things about it is it displays social values of our ancestors and the social dynamics that Asatru fosters or responds to. And those things are timeless. The circumstance might be different, but the principles remain. And that's shown throughout. Your point that women, by how they react to men in the group, affect the way other men see things, because they notice the deference shown. They notice those things. In the same way that you mentioned about men notice those things as well. And we absolutely, every single one of us, sizes each other up at first sight, and it's instinctual when we don't. I wonder how women perceive that when we say it, because I think it may mean different things to them than it does to us. Yes, if you perceive that you could possibly be that person's rival in some way, you size them up in a martial way, like, hey, can I take this guy, or would this guy kick my butt? But you do the same thing with old men. You know, see how he carries himself. See if he has the look of somebody that's seen some stuff that's worthy of listening to, or see if he's foolish. You see those things. You size all of those things up. You size up if they've got a limp, or if, you know, wow, okay, that guy's limping. Why is he limping? You know, has he seen some stuff? Is that leg his? How does this work? You always wonder those things. And something that's, I think it's one of the things, two things. Sorry guys, I'm at this camp and I'm a little bit distracted, but two things. One of the ways that people recognize immediately that Beowulf is a dignified guest, yeah, he's the biggest and the strongest and he's acting boldly. But heroes of old would always display their best war gear, or display their, you know, best whatever, depending upon the circumstance. But when he hopped out of that boat, he probably hopped out of that boat wearing as much of his treasure as he could put on himself to look his very best and to make an impression. Trying to look your best and make good first impressions was central to the world of our ancestors, is central to the concept of Asatru, and is central to our interaction, whether we want to admit it or not. So looking the part is really important. And the other thing is being of noble bearing. There's something about, and we all pick up on this in different ways, but when sizing people up, does this person stand tall? Is their head held high? Are their shoulders out? Is their chest out? Are they, you know, they have a swagger to their walk? How do they carry themselves? So we see a lot in the lore talks about, you know, a prince's son does this, a prince's son does that. The idea that a noble, a warrior, a prince among men displays certain things, and those things were almost always equated to some sort of a martial element to them. But yeah, those things are really important, and we all do those things whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
One of my favorite quotes from this particular text, I have a few, but one of my favorite that we have is, I'm going to kind of read it in the one that we already have, is, anyone with gumption and sharp mind will take measure of two things, what's said and what's done. And Hall says that as the difference surely twixt words and works, the warlike shield bearer, who judges wisely well shall determine. So a person with brains will determine the truth of two things, what is done and what is said. And he basically says, I believe you, and I have a feeling you're about to show me. So that's really wise words that I believe. Anyone with gumption and sharp mind will take measure of two things, what's said and what's done, because you can say anything that you want to do. And he says, I believe you, but he has to wait to be shown this now, right? So Beowulf's also going to have to step up to this boast, and he's going to have to step up to the deed. Words are nothing sometimes. Words can be an inhalation of breath and an exhalation of sound, and then from there it is nothing. That is why we take oaths so seriously. If you make that oath, do it with intent. Don't just say it. The words are important, so make sure that you make them count, and make sure you follow up with action and deeds, not just words, because you have to measure both things, not just one. Anything to add on that, sir?
No, just a thought to the reaction back when you mentioned that no one tried to talk him out of it. Everyone immediately jumped in line of, okay, cool, let's back this guy, because he's chosen to take it upon himself to bear the burden of those words. And in a properly functioning society, that means everything. When we're sitting around joking or whatever, you can carry on in one way. But once somebody steps up and says, all right, I'm that guy, I'm going to do it, let's go, that person has put himself on the spot. And, you know, you can either get on the team or you can stand on the sidelines and wish you'd gotten on the team. Because there was no question this person was going to follow through on their words or die trying. Anything else would make them, you know, just as the reputation of the hero precedes one, the reputation of the coward precedes one as well.
Definitely. All right, we're not getting any questions, so I'm going to keep going, guys. We're going to go on Fit 6. Yeah, we're going to do just Fit 6 real quick, because there's just a couple things that I want to point out on this one. Again, we're building layers, so you are going to see the narrator. The narrator is going to repeat a few things. Like I said, he's going to meet somebody. He's going to like, hey, I'm Beowulf. Beowulf, I'm awesome. Next person, hey, I'm Beowulf. I'm awesome. Next person, hey, I'm Beowulf. I'm awesome. That's kind of the process that we're going, but you're going to notice a couple themes in this here when I say about men addressing men. It was a paved track, a path that kept them in marching order. Their mail shirts glinted hard and hand-linked. The high gloss iron of their armor rang. So they duly arrived in their grim wargaith and gear at the hall, and weary from the sea, stacked wide shields of the toughest hardwood against the wall. Then collapsed on the benches, battle dress and weapons clashed. They collected their spears in the seafarer's stock and a stand of grayish tapering ash, and the troop themselves were as good as their weapons. Then a proud warrior questioned the men concerning their origins. Where do you come from carrying those decorated shields and shirts of mail, these cheek-hinged helmets and javelins? I am Hrothgar's herald and officer. I have never seen so impressive or large an assembly of strangers. Stoutness of heart, bravery, not banishment, must have brought you to Hrothgar. The men whose name was known for courage, the Geat leader, resolute in his helmet, answered in return. We are retainers from Hygelaic's band. Beowulf is my name. If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand. Wulfgar replied, a Wendel chief renowned as a warrior, well known for his wisdom and temper of his mind. I will take this message in accordance with your wish to our noble king, our dear lord, friend of the Danes, the giver of rings. I will go and ask him about your coming here, then hurry back with whatever reply it pleases him to give. With that, he turned to where Hrothgar sat, and an old man among retainers. The valiant follower stood foursquare in front of his king. He knew the courtesies. Wulfgar addressed his dear lord. People from Geatland have put ashore. They have sailed far over the wide sea, and they call the chief in charge of their band by the name of Beowulf. They beg my lord an audience with you, exchange of words, a formal greeting. Most gracious Hrothgar, do not refuse them, but grant them a reply. From their arms and appointment, they appear well born and worthy of respect, especially the one who has led them this far. He is formidable indeed. So we've got Beowulf making an impression, not just on the sentry that's sitting on the wall, that's just out there doing his job, an everyday man, okay? He is impressing an everyday man. He is now impressing a man of leadership, okay? So we are working our way up to the top here. Just by talking to him and just by the way he held himself, with the things that he had on his back, with his shields, with his spears, with the quality of men that he had with him, he is formidable indeed. This middleman between Beowulf and the king is telling him, you know, Hrothgar, don't refuse him. Like, there's something about this guy. I feel it in my bones. I think this is the one that's gonna rip the man purse off of Grendel's shoulders and save us. Has impressed a normal human being man, an everyday man. Now he is impressing a noble man. It is harder to impress people the further up the line of their authority. Not saying that you don't deserve that or that the authority itself has any bearing to it. It's the quality of person in that authority. That quality, in theory, should rise at each step. So he's impressing the next level. So that again tells you the quality of the nobility and goodness and strength of Beowulf and how he holds himself and his men. All right. And I also want you to remember the name Wulfgar. This is going to come up later, and it's going to be very, very important. So remember that name, Wulfgar. Sir, do you have anything to add on this particular fit?
No.
Nope. All right. All right, I'm going to do one more, and then we will check in from there. So now we're sitting at the king. So Beowulf has arrived. He has been given authorization to move forward. He gets pointed to the hall. He gets to the hall, and the advisor to the king goes, "Whoa, who are you? What are you here for?" "I'm Beowulf. I'm awesome. Here's why. Gonna kill your monster." "All right, you look legit. Gonna take you to the king." He comes back and says, "All right, you get to talk to the king." So this is what we do from there. Hrothgar, protector of the Scyldings, replied, "I used to know him when he was a young boy. His father before him was called Ecgtheow. Hrethel the Geat gave Ecgtheow his daughter in marriage. This man is their son, here to follow up an old friendship. A crew of seamen who sailed for me once with a gift cargo across to Geatland returned with marvelous tales about him. A thane, they declared, with the strength of 30 in the group of each hand. Now holy God has in his goodness guided him here to the West Danes to defend us from Grendel. This is my hope, and for his heroism I will recompense him with rich treasure. Go immediately, bid him in the Geats he has an attendance to assemble and enter. Say moreover when you speak to him that they are welcome to Denmark." At the door of the hall, Wulfgar duly delivers this message. "My lord, the conquering king of the Danes, bids me to announce that he knows your ancestry, also that he welcomes you here to Heorot and salutes your arrival from across the sea. You are free now to move forward to meet Hrothgar in helmets and armor, but shields must stay here. Spears must be stacked until the outcome of the audience is clear." The hero arose, surrounded closely by his powerful thanes. A party remained under orders to keep watch on arms, and the rest proceeded, led by their prince under Heorot's roof, and standing on the hearth in his webbed links that the smith had woven. The fine forge of meth in his gleaming mail shirt, resolute in his helmet, Beowulf spoke. "Greetings to Hrothgar. I am Hyglath's kinsman, one of his hall troop. When I was younger, I had great triumphs. The news of Grendel, hard to ignore, reached me at home. Sailors brought stories of plight you suffer in this legendary hall. Now it lies deserted, empty, and useless once the evening light hides itself under heaven's dome. So every elder and experienced councilman among my people supported my resolve to come here to you, King Hrothgar, because all knew of my awesome strength. They had seen me bolstered in the blood of enemies when I battled and bound 5 beasts, raided a troll nest, and in the night sea slaughtered sea brutes. I have suffered extremes and avenged the Geats. Their enemies brought it upon themselves. I devastated them. Now I mean to be a match for Grendel. Settle the outcome in single combat. And so, my request, O King of Bright Danes, dear Prince of the Scyldings, friend of the people in the ring of defense, my one request is that you won't refuse me, who have come this far, the privilege of purifying Heorot, with my own men to help me and nobody else. I have heard, moreover, that the monster scorns in his reckless way to use weapons, therefore. To heighten Hyglath's fame and gladden his heart, I hereby renounce sword and the shelter of the broad shield. The heavy war board, hand to hand, is how it will be, a life and death fight with the fiend. Whichever one fells must deem it a just judgment by God. If Grendel wins, it will be a gruesome day. He will glut himself on the Geats in the war hall, swoop without fear on the flower of manhood as on others before. Then my face won't be there to be covered in death. He will carry me away as he goes to the ground, gorged and bloodied. He will run gloating with my raw corpse and feed on it alone in cruel frenzy, fouling his moor nest. No need then to lament for long or lay out my body. If the battle takes me, send me back to this breast webbing and the Wayland fashioned and Hrethel gave to me. So Lord Hyglac, fate goes ever as fate must." Okay. Couple things on this one because it's super exciting. So he goes over to Hrothgar and he says, "Hey, I know this guy named Beowulf." He's like, "Beowulf? I know Beowulf. I know Beowulf's dad. I know Beowulf from when he was little. I know, I've heard all about Beowulf. I know the things. His reputation precedes him. The reputation of his father precedes him. The reputation of his king, also his uncle, precedes him. There is already a relationship here." I think we lost the Alshira. There is already a relationship between Hrothgar and Beowulf. He even says in here, he's here to repay a debt. He is here to help for a reason. Okay? All right. So another thing I want to put in there is Now I mean to be a match for Grendel, settle the outcome in single combat. He's going to do this by himself with his own men. He does not want anybody else but his trusted men to help him here. Okay? So he's also heard, moreover, that Grendel doesn't use weapons. Grendel is hand-to-hand combat. He doesn't use a sword. He doesn't have any armor. Beowulf just scoops up 30 people, throws in his man purse, runs away, bloodies the hall. So he's like, you know what? If Grendel's not going to use a sword, then I am going to bring even brighter fame to this situation, to myself, to Hrothgar, to my kin, to your hall. I'm going to go toe-to-toe with Grendel. No sword, no shield, no nothing. Just me and Grendel, man to man, right? Man to monster. And he makes this boast, and he makes this oath that this is what he's going to do. And he says, fate goes ever as fate must. Or as Leslie Hall puts in theirs, goes weird as she must go. So this is very much the concept of fate. If it is my day to die, it is my day to die. If the ancestors are calling me home today, then the ancestors are going to call me home today. It's me or Grendel, whichever one it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I am not going to fear what's going to happen because fate is what fate is. I will not fear actions, and I will not fear pain and suffering, because if it is my day to go, it's my day to go. And that is a concept of fate that has carried our ancestors through and still affects us today. If it's our day to go, it's our day to go. We will live without fear up until that day. I'll share your Gothi. Anything to add on that?
Not really, other than restating the obvious that courage is fundamental to nobility and to worth. His courage makes him worthy. Courage equals worth.
Yes. All right. So now we're going to go into the next fit. This is going to be fit number 8. This is going to be when we hear Hrothgar's story about how he knows Beowulf and exactly what's going on with Grendel. Hrothgar, the helmet of the Shieldings, spoke. Beowulf, my friend, you have traveled here to favor us with help to fight for us. There was a feud one time, began by your father. With his own hands he had killed Hrethgar, who was a wolfing. So war was looming, and his people, in fear of it, forced him to leave. He came away then over rolling waves to the Souththanes here, the sons of honor. I was then in the first flush of kingship, establishing my sway over all the rich strongholds of this heroic land, Heorot. My older brother and the better man, also a son of Halfdene, had died. Finally, I healed the feud by pain. I shipped treasure trove to the Wolfings, and thou acknowledged me with an oath of allegiance. It bothers me to have to burden anyone with all the grief that Grendel has caused, and the havoc that he has wreaked upon Heorot. Our humiliations, my household guard, are on the wane. Fate sweeps them away into Grendel's clutches. But God can easily halt these raids and harrowing attacks. Time and again, when the goblets passed and seasoned fighters got flushed with beer, they would pledge themselves to protect Heorot and wait for Grendel with wedded words. But when the dawn broke and the day crept over each party, blood-spattered benches, the floor of the mead hall where they had feasted would be slick with slaughter. And so they died, faithful retainers, and my following dwindled. Now take your place at the table, relish the triumph of heroes to your heart's content. Then the bench was cleared in the banquet hall so the Geats could have room to be together, and the party sat, proud in their bearing, strong and stalwart. An attendant stood by with a decorated pitcher, pouring bright helpings of mead, and the minstrel sang, filling her out with his head-clearing voice, gladdening the great rally of the Geats and the Danes. All right, so Hrothgar already knows of Beowulf. He even said that. I know Beowulf. I know him since he was like this tall, right? Because I know his dad. Bailed his dad out in a bad spot. You know, his dad ended up killing somebody, which was one of the Wolfians, and then his people kind of kicked him out and said, man, you got us in way over our head, and this is on you. He went over there to Hrothgar, and Hrothgar took him in. Not only did Hrothgar take him in, Hrothgar paid the weregild. He sent treasures over to the Wolfians, and in return, Ecthau owes him allegiance, right? His son Beowulf showing up in the greatest time of need. is a partial repayment for that. That oath of allegiance is following over to Beowulf. Beowulf is gifting that in return. So again, gift cycle, allegiance, loyalty, gift for a gift, and the building of Frith. Shiragothi, anything to say about that?
Yes. No, honestly, you're covering it super well. Beowulf, like I said, is really important to me. I'm not glossing over it, but you're hitting all the points that need to be hit. The idea of the endurance of loyalty for generations is just worth thinking on when folks have a moment. I know that in 2023, loyalty is fleeting, and so much in our lives seems disposable. The generational loyalty of, hey, you helped my dad back in the day, cool, I've got you now. I don't think we see that exhibited today nearly as often as we should, and it's something we should certainly see more.
I agree. All right, these next fits are going to be long, but I'm going to read them together because it's important. We're going to be talking about Unferth, and we're going to be talking about Brecca. And I would like to read them together because it flows better. It makes a little bit more sense when we go back and talk about it. So I'm going to go ahead and read fits 9 and 10. I'll try to make this quick, but it's important to get the whole context of it before we start breaking it down. If at any point in time you guys want me to summarize, I'll summarize El Shiragothi if we start getting tired or something. All right. From where he crouched at the king's feet, Unferth, the son of Eclof, spoke contrary words. Beowulf's coming. His sea braving made him sick with envy. He could not brook or abide the fact that anyone else alive under heaven might enjoy greater regard than he did. Are you the Beowulf who took on Brecca in the swimming match on the open sea, risking the water just to prove that you could win? It was sheer vanity made you venture out into the main deep, and no matter who tried, friend or foe, to deflect the pair of you, neither would back down. The sea test obsessed you. You waded in, embracing the water, taking its measure, mastering currents, riding on the swell. The ocean swayed, winter went wild in the waves, but you vied for 7 nights, and then he outswam you, came ashore the stronger contender. He was cast up safe and sound one morning among the Hrothgars and made his way to where he belonged in rotting country. Home again, sure of his ground, in strong room and bond. So Brecca made good his boast upon you and was proven right. No matter, therefore, how you may have fared in every bout and battle until now, this time you'll be worsted. No one has ever outlasted an entire night against Grendel. Beowulf, Ecgtheow's son, replied, Well, friend Unferth, you have had your say about Brecca and me, but it was mostly beer that was doing the talking. The truth is, when going was heavy in those high waves, I was the strongest swimmer of all. We'd been children together and grew up daring ourselves to outdo one another, boasting and urging each other to risk our lives in the sea, and so it turned out each of us swam holding a sword, a naked, hard-proof blade for protection against the whale beasts. But Brecca could never move out farther or faster from me, and than I could manage to move out from him. Shoulder to shoulder, we struggled on for 5 nights, and so the long flow and the pitch of the waves, he perished. Cold night, falling winds from the north drove us apart. The deep boiled up in its wallowing scent of the sea roots wild. My armor helped me to hold out. My hand ring, chain-mailed, hand-forged, and linked, a fine, close-fitting filigree of gold, kept me safe when some ocean creature pulled me to the bottom. Pinion fast and swayed in his grip, I was granted one final chance. My sword plunged and the ordeal was over. Through my hands, the fury of battle had finished off the sea beast. All right. We're going to go on to the next one here. Time and again, foul things attacked me, lurking and stalking, but I lashed out, gave as good as I got with my sword. My flesh was not for feasting on, and there would be no monsters gnawing and gloating over the banquet at the bottom of the sea. Instead, in the morning, mangled and sleeping, the sleep of the sword, they slopped and floated like the ocean's leavings. From now on, sailors would be safe. The deep sea raids were over for good. Light came out from the east, bright guarantee of God, and the waves went quiet. I could see headlands and buffeted cliffs. Often for undaunted courage, fate spares the man it is not already marked. However, it occurred my sword had killed 9 sea monsters. Such night dangers and hard ordeals I have never heard of, nor a man more desolate in surging waves. But worn out as I was, I survived. Came through with my life. The ocean lifted and laid me ashore, and I landed safe on the coast of Finland. Now I cannot recall any fight you entered, Unferth, that bears comparison. I don't boast when I say that neither you nor Brecca were ever much celebrated for your swordsmanship, or for facing danger in the field of battle. You killed your own kith and kin, so for all your cleverness and quick tongue, you will suffer damnation in the depths of hell. The fact is, Unferth, if you were truly as keen and courageous as you claim to be, Grendel would never have gone away with you such unchecked atrocity. Attacks on your king, havoc and Heorot and horrors everywhere. But he knows he need not ever be in dread of your blade making a mizzle of his blood, or a vengeance arriving ever from this quarter from the victory shieldings, the shoulders of spear. He knows he can trample down you Danes to his heart's content, humiliate and murder without any fear of reprisal. But he will find me different. I will show him how Geat shaped to kill in the heat of battle. Then whoever wants to may go bravely to mead when morning light, scarfed in sun dazzle, shines forth from the south and brings another daybreak to the world. Then the gray-haired treasure-giver was glad. Far famed in battle, the prince of the bright Danes and keeper of his people counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness in his word. So the laughter started and the din got louder and the crowd was happy. Wealhtheow came in, Hrothgar's queen, observing the courtesies adorning her gold. She graciously saluted the men in the hall and handed the cup first to Hrothgar, their homeland's guardian, urging him to drink the cup and enjoy it, because he was dear to them. And he drank it down like the warlord he was with festive cheer. So the helming woman went on her rounds, queenly and dignified, decked out in rings, offering the goblet to all ranks, treating the household and the ensemble troop until Beowulf's turn to take it from her hand. With measured words she welcomed the Geat and thanked him for granting her wish, that a deliverer she could believe in would arrive in case their afflictions. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action and eager for it always. He addressed Wealhtheow. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, said, I have fixed purpose when I put to sea. As I sat in the boat with my band of men, I meant to perform to the uttermost what your people wanted to perish in the attempt, in the Thrane's clutches, and I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death in the mead hall. This formal boast by Beowulf the Geat pleased the lady well, and she went to sit by Hrothgar, regal and arrayed in gold. Then it was like old times in the echoing hall, proud talk and people happy, loud and excited. Soon enough, Halfdane's heir had to be away to the night's rest. He realized that the demon was going to descend the hall, and he had plotted all day, from dawn light until darkness, gathered again over the world, and stealthily night shapes came stealing forth under the cloud mark. The company stood as the two leaders took leave of each other. Hrothgar wished Beowulf health and good luck, named him hall warden, and announced as follows. Never since my hand could hold a shield have I entrusted or given of the Danes' hall to anyone but you. Word and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now, keeping your mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for won't be yours if you win through alive. All right. This is one of my favorite parts of Beowulf. And I know Sarah's in the chat and she's probably going to be laughing when I do this, but Unferth, go home, Unferth, you're drunk. Okay. He's like, so you're Beowulf, huh? You're here to save the day. So I want you to picture this thing. All right. Unferth is sitting at the foot of the king. At the foot of the king. Not beside the king. He's not, sitting in a place of honor. He's sitting at the foot of the king. Kind of just sitting there taking up space. Yes, this part irritates me. So I love to hate Unferth. That's going to be the first thing that you need to know about me when I start on this rant. I love to hate Unferth. First thing you need to know about Unferth is his name means Unfrith, right? His name literally means pot stirrer, shit starter, anti-frith, unfrith. His name literally means that when you translate it through. That's not a good start, okay? He's sitting at the feet of the king, and nobody's really talking to him. He is unimportant until he opens his mouth in a disrespectful way. And he opens his mouth because he is angry that Beowulf is there because somebody is taking attention from him. So from the way it sounds in this book, in this poem here, he's known and he's renowned and he's got a good reputation, but it's all kind of false, right? because he says, oh, wasn't that you that went with Brecca, and you couldn't even swim against Brecca. Brecca whooped you. What do you have to say about that? You're sitting here giving me your resume on how awesome you are. You couldn't even win a swimming match against Brecca. And Beowulf says, yeah, well, go home, Unferth, you're drunk. Sorry. Let me tell you about my match with Brecca. We swam for days and days, shoulder to shoulder. Keep in mind, we have been told there is no man stronger, faster, better than Beowulf. So we'll get into the shoulder to shoulder with Brecca here in a minute. But the only thing that kept Beowulf from beating Brecca was the fact that he was dragged down to the bottom of the ocean by a whole bunch of sea monsters, which is going to be a theme, and Beowulf just needs to learn to stay out of the water. Dragged down to the ocean, and he has to fight sea monsters. So he says, you know what, I didn't technically lose that battle to Brecca. I mean, I guess I did, but here's the thing. I was battling sea monsters. And not only did I battle sea monsters and I killed them all, and all of their bits and pieces were floating on top of the ocean, I just saved all the sailors in the future because you know what? No more sea monsters. Now, how about you, Unferth, you kinslayer? Because I don't hear anything about you. You can't wield a sword, and you have not had any prowess in battle. Come to think of it, you know what? You're still sitting here, which tells me that you've never actually battled Grendel, because nobody who's ever actually battled Grendel has survived. So let me just go ahead and put this on you, that you are absolutely the reason, and your attitude and your kinslaying is more than likely the reason Grendel's running free to begin with. How about them apples? Anyway, that's my rant about Unferth. You have a kinslayer sitting at the foot of the king in the hall. You have a kinslayer running his mouth in a feast hall. What is the worst thing that you could possibly do to your community? Kill your kin, right? And here he is sitting at the foot of the king, listening to the king's conversations, listening to what's said to the king, listening to all of these things. So Beowulf puts him in his place, and he tells him, yeah, go home, Unferth, you're drunk. And then he talks about, this is actually what happened with Brecca. Interesting thing about Brecca, if he is the biggest and the strongest and the fastest, why is he swimming shoulder to shoulder with a man? And he tells us this. He tells us that we have been friends since childhood. His nobility, his good character, and his goodness, I believe, are the reasons that they were shoulder to shoulder for 5 days. He wasn't going to leave Brecca alone. The only thing that separated Brecca, and he says so in his narrative, the only thing that was able to separate him from Brecca was the sea itself, was the power of nature itself that he could not control, that overpowered him. And then he got sucked down to sea monsters. Even in competition, he did not leave his childhood friend behind. He was shoulder to shoulder with him until he was face to face with sea monsters, separated him by the ocean itself, which to our ancestors is going to be the most powerful force there is. It tells you a lot about Beowulf's character. So I'm going to stop there and see if the Alshira has anything to add about Unferth.
No, not specifically. Again, you covered it very well, but I think there is a long tradition, especially in the hall, of often someone feeble and of semi-comical character, testing and challenging oaths and things and calling people out and seeing how they respond. We see that in the file position in stumbles and toasting. We also see reflections of that in the medieval period with court jesters. They could get away with acting completely inappropriately in a court where there would be great consequences to people outside of that position, but there's something to be said of the, dude that sits at the king's feet and challenges stuff and says uncouth things that he feels need to be said. Now, the way it's described here, Unferth is a dishonorable toad and not a good person. And Beowulf, more than meets the challenge to, his words. But that's important. And that also talks about that hall culture. And so much of this goes back to how we perform the ritual of Sumbul, is having someone that challenges oaths if necessary. The other thing is, truth is one of our virtues. There is a place, even in the presence of royalty, of a certain amount of frankness and honesty, as opposed to not. If something needs to be said, or you feel like you need to say something, because nothing erodes Frith worse than grumbling under your breath and a latent, just under the surface hostility that doesn't get aired. In the hall culture, if you could air your problem and get it dealt with swiftly and immediately, then everybody could go on with their merriment and not have that toxicity in the hall.
So we got a couple questions about this particular couple of fits. Sarah starts with, Hrothgar was such a great king, yet he let a kinslayer sit at his feet. Could this be part of the reason for Grendel's presence? So I'm going to answer that in Brandyland Beowulf, and then I'm going to let Matt give us his answer on that one. Grendel was Grendel's type was originated because of the monstrosity that is kinslaying. That's specifically said. It's very telling to me that Hrothgar's being attacked and he's got a kinslayer at his feet. Does he know he's a kinslayer? We don't know. Beowulf does. But what are you letting into your house? What kind of wisdom are you relying on? Because with where he's sitting, is he just that yappy chihuahua? Or is he listening to all of these conversations and working all of these politics and taking advantage of situations, right? Is he the reason? I don't think he's the reason, but it's very telling that you have somebody, because it's a theme that you see layered over and over again. The most horrible characters in this story are all kinslayers. Every single one of them. So could it be part of it? I don't know. Brandyland Beowulf would probably say, yeah, it means something. It means something that is Unferth specifically that challenges Beowulf. To me, that's significant. But I'll let the Al-Shiragothi give his opinion on that.
It's significant in that it reinforces the overriding theme, but I don't think it's the reason that Grendel and his reign of terror is being inflicted upon Hrothgar. But it's certainly relevant. It's not accidental. That is a theme throughout this piece, and I think this is another touch back to that theme.
Adam's got a question. Beowulf seems to like to prove himself by swimming contests. Is there any historical significance to that? Was that a thing? The swimming contest itself. So remember, our narrator never lies to us, and our narrator is setting up layers. We repeat the same things over and over again. He's preparing you for what's to come. Not only does the story of Breca in the swimming contest prove his strength, his worth, his nobility, his commitment to friends and Frith. That shows all of that, but it also sets us up for what he has to do with Grendel's mother, which is going to be coming in part 2. The narrator continually gives us little hints. He'll say something or something will happen. Like Beowulf will tell a story about fighting sea monsters. And the next thing you know, he's fighting a sea drake, right? So you kind of just got to watch what the narrator's doing. Is there any historical context significance to that? Historical, not that I know of, but I'll let the Al-Shiragothi touch on that. He might have something. But what I'm getting from this contest specifically, is the showing of his loyalty to Breca, that he didn't desert his friend until the sea, which was the most strongest force they knew of, separated them, And then he killed a whole bunch of sea monsters. So it increases his worth, it increases his fame, increases his luck, and it also sets us up for what's to come. Alshira Gothi?
Yes, absolutely. It's a historical thing, but when forced to come up with a specific example of it in history or to cite a time of it, I can't, other than the princes, sons of kings, nobles would always, since the furthest imaginings, compete at noble arts that are tests of strength and whatever else. We see this constantly with horse racing or spear throwing or rock throwing, or hey, watch me do this thing, can you do it better? Usually as it relates to warfare, but very often we see warriors going overboard in Viking contests between the boats. We see that frequently in the sagas. Swimming was certainly not unknown and something that these folks had to learn how to do, and swimming with the weight of some war gear on you was also something that was commonly done for sport and for contest. I can get back to you. I can't think of a time off the top of my head outside of this showing of it in Beowulf, but it absolutely was a thing, and I don't think we're going far out on a limb to say that.
All right. So we've got 3 more fits to do, and then the rest of that we're probably going to put in with Grendel and Grendel's mother in the upcoming call. So we have 3 more fits to do. As long as you guys are patient with us, appreciate all of your comments and encouragement and questions. All right. So the watch for Grendel. So Hrothgar has entrusted Beowulf with his hall. This is a big deal. For those of you that are close to Hoffs, this is a big deal. You understand the attachment that you have to that building, especially if you've had to build it from the ground up. There is literally a piece of you in that building, and that's not something that I can explain to somebody who hasn't built them. The Alshira Gothi understands what I'm talking about. There's literally a piece of the Alshira Gothi in every Hoff. There's a piece of me literally in Baldur's Hoff. For all of you who tend those buildings, it's a physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual attachment. So I did not understand that part of it where he's like, I've never trusted my hall to anybody. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a super expensive hall. No, I get it now. It's my Hoff. This is his hall. But that's something that I never fully comprehended. As many times as I read it, I understood it, but it never sparked that understanding and that feeling in your soul that, oh yeah, I get it, Hrothgar. I get it, man. I know what you're doing. But he's leaving his hall to Beowulf, which is a big deal. And he's trusting him with it. He's hoping I see you in the morning. Hrothgar's going to bed not knowing if he's going to wake up to a massacre or triumph. Okay? It's all up in the air at this point. So we are going to go into fit number 11, the watch for Grendel. Hrothgar departed then with his house guard, the Lord of the Shieldings, their shelter in war, left the mead hall to lie with Wethla, his queen and bedmate. The king of glory, as people learned, had posted a lookout who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, special protection to the Danish prince. And the Geat placed complete trust in his strength of limb in the Lord's favor. He began to remove his iron breastmail, took off his helmet, and handed his attendant the patterned sword, a smith's masterpiece, ordering him to keep the equipment guarded. And before he bedded down, Beowulf, the prince of goodness, proudly asserted, when it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel. So it won't be a cutting edge I'll weed to mow him down easily as I might. He had no idea of the arts of war, of shield, or of swordplay, although he does possess a wild strength. No weapons, therefore, for either this night. Unarmed, he shall face me, if face me he dares. and may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit. Then down the brave man lay with his bolster under his head and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again or get back to his native place and the people who reared him. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to the death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weather geats. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God ruled over mankind and always has. Then out of the night came the shadow stalker, stealthy and will. The hall guards were slack, asleep at their posts. All except one. It was widely understood that as long as God disallowed it, the fiend could not bear them to his shadowborn. One man, however, was in a fighting mood, awake and on edge, spoiling for action. So there's only a couple things that I want to point out on this one. Hrothgar goes to bed and leaves Beowulf and all of his men there. What does one man do? I want you to think about this. These men knowingly got into this boat with him, not knowing if they were going to come back. Now we have one man who's knowingly going to be the first person at the door. You think of all these guys lined up on the mead benches, and then you got one who's kind of the barricade. They don't know if they're going home. They don't think they're going home. They might die here, and they're okay with that because they're dying with Beowulf. They're dying with a noble leader. They are dying for a noble cause. They will go down in fame and glory, and their names will be in songs and lays that are sung in halls, etc., etc., etc. This is loyalty. This is fidelity. This is a prime example of fidelity. Fidelity is a virtue. These men would die for Beowulf. These men would die for Beowulf's cause. Why? Because Beowulf is good and Beowulf is noble. Beowulf is a hero. Beowulf has a reputation and fame. He is known to be a good and noble man. So they are knowingly lying down, knowingly possibly going to die. Shirigo, do you have anything to add about that at all?
Yeah, they were Beowulf's men, and a way it was expressed was for a lord's retainers to outlive him on the battlefield was shameful, because they allowed their king to go down and they made it home. And in the inverse, for Beowulf in front of his retainers not to be the first in battle, not to lead the charge, was equally shameful. That reciprocity with lord and retainer is another one of the things this poem illustrates in a really beautiful and a straightforward way. And I think that's the essential thing. If they are all going to die, then I'm going to be the first one at the door. I'm going to have the pride of place of being the one that goes down first. That in and of itself was an honor for that man.
And one of the really interesting things for me on this one, they slept. Now, Shirogodi. They slept with peace of mind. Why did they have peace of mind? Because what fate is, fate will be, right?
Yeah, the battle is half won because they have the courage to be there. Mm-hmm. The fact that they were there and they slept, even if they lose, they die as heroes. Mm-hmm. And if they win, even the more so. But the hard part was over.
Yeah. The hard part was getting on the boat to even go there. All right, 2 more fits left, guys. And I'm going to read them together and we will cover them from there. They're a little long, bear with me. In the moors down through the mist bands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey in the high hall. Under the cloud mark he moved towards it until it shone above him a sheer keep of fortified gold. Nor was that first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, though never in his life, before or since, did he find harder fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead and arrived at the bawn. The iron braced door turned on its hinge, and his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of his building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with a loathsome tread, while a baleful light, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. He saw many men in the mansion, sleeping, a ranked company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together, and his glee was demonic. Picturing the mayhem before morning, he would rip life from limb and devour them, feed on their flesh. But his fate that night was due to change, his days of ravening to come to an end, mighty and canny. Hygla's kinsman was keenly watching for the first move the monster would make, nor did the creature keep him waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone lappings, bolted down his blood, and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up, hand and foot. Venturing closer, his talon was raised to attack Beowulf, where he lay on the bed. He was bearing in with open claw when the alert hero's comeback and arm lock forestalled him utterly. The captain of evil discovered himself in a hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body quailed and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee in his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all of his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this. Then Hygla's trusty retainer called his bedtime speech, sprang to his feet, and got a firm hold. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. The dread of the land was desperate to escape, to take a roundabout road and flee to his lair in the fens. The latching power in his fingers weakened, and in the worst trip the terrormonger had taken to Heorot. And now the timbers trembled and sang, a hall session that harrowed every Dane inside the stockade, stumbling in fury. The two contenders clashed to the building, the hall clattered and hammered, but somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. It was handsomely structured, a sturdy frame, braced with the best of the blacksmith's work inside and out. The story goes that as the pair struggled, the mead benches were smashed and sprang on the floor, gold fittings and all. Before them, no shielding elder would believe that there was any power on earth capable of wrecking the horn-rigged hall unless the burning brace of a fire engulf it in flames. Then an extraordinary wail arose, a bewildering fear came over the Danes. Everyone felt it who heard that cry as if it echoed off the wall, a god-cursed scream, strains of catastrophe, a howl of the loser, the lament of the hell-serf keening his wound. He was overwhelmed, menaced tight by the man who of all was foremost and strongest in the days of his life. But the Earl Troop's leader was not inclined to allow Collar to depart alive. He did not consider the life much account to anyone anywhere. Time and again, Beowulf's warriors worked to defend their lord's life, laying about them as best they could with their ancestral blades. Stalwart in action, they kept striking out on every side, seeking to cut straight to the soul. When they joined in struggle, there was something they could not have known at the time, that no blade on earth, no blacksmith art could ever damage the demon opponent. He had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon, but his going away out of his world in the days of his life would be agony to him, and his alien spirit would travel far into the fiend's keeping. Then he who would have harrowed the hearts of men with pain and affliction with former times and had given offense also to God, found that his bodily powers failed him. Hygla's kinsman kept him helplessly locked in a hand grip. As long as either lived, he was faithful to the other. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split in the bone-lapping burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desperate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him, and he knew for certain. And one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The man who had lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall. Kept it from harm, he was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The Geat captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes, and he had healed and relieved a huge distress, unrelenting humiliations. The hard fate they had been forced to undergo, no small affliction. Clear proof of his could be seen in the hand of the hero displayed high near the roof, the whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. Okay, so here comes Grendel, loping around, super excited because there's all kinds of people. So the hall again, and it says in here, the hall again sounded like it used to. There was hope in the hall, right? There is a renewed hope with the arrival of Beowulf. Somebody this time might make it through. He might actually get this. There's nobody bigger, badder, stronger than Beowulf. We might actually get our savior here, right? And there is a renewed hope. And that can be demonstrated with while walking around and actually doing a stumble with them and him boasting, and the people are happy and singing. Grendel hasn't actually heard that in a long time. One of the things that put him in the rage was the joy of these people to begin with, and now he hears it all over again. He's like, all right, here we go, fresh blood. I've got a whole new brand. You know, it's like getting a brand new kind of potato chips you've never had for before. You know, it's like getting the new version of Wrap Snacks, right, Matt? You know, he got all these Danes for a long time, and now he got this fresh blood with the Geats. Maybe they taste different. Beowulf's super excited. A whole bunch of people to eat. And he is unafraid. He is unafraid. He has never felt fear. Ever. Never felt fear. And Beowulf even yells at Unferth over this. He has no fear of you. He walks all over you. Zero fear. You are not scary. Zero fear. But as Grendel walks in here, he picks up the first man, and it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. You got bits and pieces flying all over the place. You know, crumbs falling in the man purse. He's super excited. He's doing his thing. The next person he goes to is Beowulf. And we have heard over and over again that there is no man as strong as Beowulf, that his grip and his strength and his might is so massive. And Grendel is grabbed by Beowulf. He's grappling with him. They are hand-to-hand combat. And Grendel fears for the first time ever. This is the first time Grendel has ever felt fear. And the first thing he wants to do is what? Run away, right? See, this is the difference between the good and the evil, the order and the chaos. The order stands firm, and the hardest hurdle is getting over your fear and doing what you need to do. Fear is a natural thing. It's how you act in that fear is what matters. And you can see the difference between Beowulf and Grendel, the success and the failure. Beowulf has already conquered his fear by going in and saying, if I die, I die. It's meant to be. Conquered that fear. Moves through that fear. Grendel, on the other hand, has zero fear, feels it for the first time, and tries to run like a bat out of hell. And in the process, gets his shoulder ripped off. Beowulf is not going to let him go without some kind of fatal wound. I guess that's what I have to say about that. Alshira Gothi, do you have anything to add? There's probably something else in there. I get excited about the shoulder ripping off. I think it's kind of exciting. Oh, and also, his Ben tried to get up and help him, but nobody knew that you can't cut him. And he's built like a sword himself. You can't cut him with swords. There's nothing you can do with him except rip his shoulder off. Alshira Gothi, commentary?
No, Brandy, you're doing too good a job. No, you got it. You covered all the important stuff. It's exciting. That is, you know, the fact that the chaos of this monster that's bred of treachery has taken all the joy from the hall and has made the place of celebration gloomy and has sapped the joy from the world. The fact that hope and that standing against the chaos not only slew it, but sent it running off to go die in a hole, while joy then took place in the hall. Joy then came back to the hall. You talked about how Grendel was spurred on by, people are in there having a good time, I better go mess it up. And we see that. We see that all of the time. We see that as a perennial infection amongst our folk. when we are winning, when we are happy and things are good, that's when chaos strikes. That's when treachery within the hall strikes and takes, snatches defeat from the jaws of victory. When we're winning and things are good, that's when we need to be most vigilant against this kind of thing attacking. And it's just beautiful how it all unfolds in, this kind of into the first chunk of our story. Uh-oh. So Brandy has disappeared. It's just me now on my end. I don't know if that is experienced by everybody or if she's coming back. But either way, I believe that's where Brandy wanted to stop tonight with her reading. In 2 weeks, we'll be back on, and Brandy's going to read to us some more for the rest of this because I think that was really nice, and I'm really glad that that's the route that Brandy took on that. She has returned, but because of her leaving and coming back, I'm now in my rightful place in the order on the screen, which I'm used to. But you're running this show tonight, Brandy. What do you got? Kick it back over to you.
Sure. So I think we're probably going to end it there with the actual part between Grendel and Beowulf. So what we have upcoming with the next call that we have is we're going to be going into a lot of background stuff about lays about certain kings and queens and certain other lays. And there's a lot of I shouldn't say historical, but there's a lot of background on that explains a lot of things. So those are going to be a little bit more labor intensive to read because you kind of got to break them down a little bit and understand why they're in the poem. We've got a couple songs coming up and things like that. No, I am not going to sing, but we have joy and celebration, and part of that joy and celebration are going to be poems about things that have happened before, and we're going to see a lot about the role of women, both good and bad, coming up in our next call, and also Grendel's mother, which is a totally different monster than Grendel. So if you guys have any questions or if there's anything that you want to see in particular, if you want us to focus on linguistics, I am not necessarily your person. I have the background, but it's only regurgitating information that people smarter than me have written down and recorded. So keep that in mind. But let us know what you guys want to see with the next one. What kind of themes? You want us to stick with the themes and keep reading, or is there something in particular that you're looking for?
So I see over in the questions, little known fact, in world history class in 9th grade, which is 1996, as a response to the question, would I prefer we return to monarchy? I was known as Monarchy Matt and I've not changed my opinion on that. I absolutely think that that's the ideal way for our folk, and that's absolutely what I'd prefer. And I don't just say that running the AFA. I say that when I was, a little nerdy kid in 9th grade history class getting mocked. So I stand by that position. I'm pretty firm on it. Also in the questions. Okay, so apparently somebody wants to see what I'm drinking. This is what I'm drinking. There's glare on it there. I have shown the can. Consider the can shown. Last question that I see on here, and then I'll kick it back over to Brandy. I am at an event, and I'm going to need to get to sleep and be ready for folks tomorrow. But what are some of the highlights from Culture of the Teutons that stand out to you? Don't know if that question was to me or Brandy, but I'll give you mine, and then I'll throw it over to Brandy, and she can give you hers, and then close out with anything she'd like to, or keep going. The night's young. So It was so good. There was a lot of moments in it that I had to, it was strange that I'd never done this in a book before, but I had to just set it down and digest it. And I had to do that several times in Culture of the Teutons. A couple of things that stood out was the idea, the better explanation for Frith. I think it literally translates into peace often, and so people leave it at that. And there's so much more to it that fleshes it out and makes it so much more robust. And something, especially for a young man as I was at the time, to get a little bit more excited about by just, than just peace. And also talking about our concept of justice. And it's easy, and Groenbeck goes, I think, a little bit unrealistically far with his idea of vengeance. But the idea of when something is taken from you, the fix is to retake that, or to be compensated, as Wergild is, in, as close to an equitable measure for what's been taken from you. We talk a lot about the idea of one paying their debt to society, but we've lost a lot of the meat to that. The point isn't just the punishment of someone who's done wrong. It's the recompense for what the person who's been wronged has lost. And that's that resettling of the scales by getting back what you lost. And that's something I just want to reiterate that I mentioned earlier about the idea of kinslaying and why that was such a horrible curse to our ancestors. If my uncle kills my brother, in any other circumstance, the answer is, okay, cool. Well, I go kill my uncle and that settles it and our family's square. But no, that means my family loses yet again. And the only way to fix that is, my cousin coming after me, and there's no end to it. And you're dealing with the same pool of resources. Even if you take that to a Wergild situation, it's money going from the pocket of one of my family members to the pocket of the other of my family members, but there's a net loss altogether. My family is made less in every step of that, so there's no winning it. It's something that's permanently lost. If a foe takes something from you, you can take something from them of equal value. You can take something from them of greater value. There's ways to settle the score, but when it's in your own house, you can't. It's just loss. And it talks in there in Culture of the Teutons about the inability of our soul to reconcile permanent loss that we can't fix in some way, that we can't rebalance or make right. But I think those are the two things that stand out the most. But it's a fantastic book all the way around.
So I think
Good night, guys. Doing awesome, Brandy. Thank you for filling in tonight.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, guys, we will pick up in 2 weeks. So Witan Swan is going to be with us next week, and I will be with you guys the week after. So if you have any questions regarding Grendel and Grendel's mother in the next episode, now is the time, or then is the time to ask them. Until then, I am going to go ahead and get some sleep as well, because I also have an event that I need to get to. So it has been great. You guys are amazing. We appreciate all the donations that we got tonight and all of your support and generosity. So until next time, guys, hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps. Good night, everybody.